What is going on, everybody? We are back at your boy Simmer, and today with the third part installment of the BDSP teams that I've got for each starter. And today we're going through Piplup, Empoleon, my very first Pokemon that I ever had ever. Like I said, Diamond was my first game, Piplup was my starter. Fantastic, had so much fun, never forget. Probably going to choose Piplup in this run. I do love Infernape and Torterra as well. I think Turtwig is really cool, and Infernape is super sick as well. But I'll probably stick with my main boy, Empoleon. So let's get straight into the team that I think I'll probably be playing in my playthrough. So obviously, like I said, starting off with the boy Piplup and Empoleon. This character is phenomenal. He's got well-rounded stats. He's not anything on the speed scale of things, but defensively and special attackly, I guess, if that's how you pronounce that. But his special attack and even his normal attack aren't anything to shy at. So he's got great all-round stats, bar his speed. He's quite bulky, very offensive. He's got a really nice move pool as well. He learns things like Drill Peck. Obviously, his special attack is higher than his attack, so you want to be focusing on moves like Surf and Flash Cannon. But Drill Peck's a great move. So is Waterfall. Great water and flying moves, covers grass types. It's fantastic. On the other end, if you have an Ice Beam, run that. Run Ice Beam every day of the week. If you can find an Ice Beam, give it to your Empoleon. Gets rid of grass, ground, it's flying, it's fantastic. Ice Beam is one of the best TMs in the game. I'll stand by that. So if you can get an Empoleon with like Hydro Pump or Surf, Flash Cannon and Ice Beam, you are in for a treat. Being a Steel type obviously gives Empoleon that ground weakness, even though it's water. Obviously water doesn't resist, but having a ground weakness is never a great thing, especially when there's a lot of Pokemon in this generation that are weak to ground. A lot of electric, a lot of poisons, a lot of cool typings that everyone loves to play and is fantastic coverage, but just gets bodied by ground types. There's nothing crazy strong about these ground types because there's not that many, but things like Hippowdon can still run through teams, or Hyperia especially is fantastic. Earthquake isn't that uncommon of a move. A lot of Pokemon can learn it, especially something like Garchomp, who could just roll through a team with Earthquakes. So you want to be careful with your Empoleon. So I've put with him, to counter the ground weakness, my favorite flying type, which is Staraptor. You could run Togekiss as well. I'll put him on the list, or them on the list, sorry. Put Togekiss and Staraptor together. I think Staraptor could be good because more often than not, Empoleon's a special attacker. So having the physical attack of Staraptor is fantastic. Running Close Combat, Brave Bird, something like that. Even Fly is a good just attacking move. But you want to run something very physical. It's fantastic. Super quick as well. Counters that. Togekiss is on the slower side. Not slow Pokemon, but compared to Staraptor, who's a little bit slow, you don't want to... Sorry, compared to Togekiss, who's slow with Empoleon, having Staraptor's higher speed stat is really beneficial. Just kind of gives you the edge in some of those fights, getting that first hit in. Obviously, the main reason for them being here is obviously to counter that ground weakness that Empoleon has, but to counter the electric weakness that we've now got for two Pokemon, which is a pain. Obviously, most teams do. Most teams, like the first team, had the water ground, which is good. But to cover this double electric weakness, I've actually made Gliscor on the team, which is obviously a bit of a strange pick. He's not a crazy mon. He's obviously very good competitively. He used to be very, very good. But having that ground type in the air is great because you're not weak to electric. Obviously, the glaring 4x ice weakness is a big pain. And then obviously Staraptor or Togekiss are also ice type, weak to ice. So Staraptor is probably the better pick. Obviously Gliscor is also physical. So having double physical flying types probably isn't ideal. But just because Gliscor is a flying type, he doesn't really learn any flying move. He can't even learn fly. Like, he's not really a flying type. He just glides in the air. So he's mostly focused on ground and things, maybe cross poison or something like that. Toxic being a bit of a pain to deal with, which is fantastic for you. But having Staraptor as well with Close Combat, faster than most ice types, really not that big of a deal having the double ice weakness. Obviously, Gliscor being 4x weak to ice is a pain, so you will need something to counter that. So maybe a fire type or a steel type, which we've got. So having that 4x ice weakness is a pain, but I feel like having that 0 electric weakness is much more beneficial, especially when you've already got two Pokemon weak to electric. You guys are probably wondering, why didn't I just choose a different ground type that wasn't 4x weak to ice and still resist electric? There is none. There's no good ground types. You can run Rhyperior. He's 4x weak to water and rock. And grass, sorry. It's terrible. Steelix could do Steelix. Steelix actually would be probably an ideal pick. But then you've got another weakness to fighting. And ground. So it's not great. I feel like this is the best ground type for a team comp. Not necessarily competitively, but for the story mode, trying to weaken out, get rid of those weaknesses, try and balance your team pretty well. Because in comp, you're not running Empoleon normally. But you're running a different water type like Keldeo or something. But you want to run something that stops that 3 electric weakness or double electric weakness, but then also isn't weak to ground or something. So having the 4x ice weakness is definitely a bummer, but it definitely far outweighs the negatives that go with it. Like I said, to counter this, obviously, ice weakness that we've got now, we don't actually need to use Staraptor's close combat. We can if he's faster. Obviously, you don't want to go up against a Weavile if you're slower. But if you are faster, it's great. Close combat, get him out of the way. But to make sure, put a lock on that door, make sure that we're not going to lose to ice types, we've made Toxicroak or Lucario. Lucario obviously is in the other team. Lucario is a great Pokemon still. I'll always stand by that, saying he's fantastic. Obviously, he Mega Evolves. He's a fan favorite. He can be a mixed attacker. Great stats, great speed, all of that. But if you're looking for something a little bit more spicy, go for Toxicroak, because Fighting Poison is a really cool typing. Obviously, 4 times weak to Psychic sucks. You don't really want to have too many of these 4 times weaknesses. We do have something to counter the 4 times weakness, so we're not too worried about that if you want to choose Toxicroak. But I think both are really good. If you can get a dry skin Toxicroak or a Croagunk, that's fantastic, because that's a water resistance. Obviously, you're weak to fire 1.25 times or something. It's not great, but it's not the worst thing in the world, because you are beating those ice types that you're worried about. You are now beating grass types more effectively with poison and fairies. You don't have to worry about fairies. Obviously, steel does that as well with Lucario. Both are weak to ground, so that's why we've also got the double flying with Gliscor and Staraptor. So that was another reason why I had Gliscor as well, to beat that double ground weakness that we've got from Empoleon and then either fighting type, Lucario or Toxicroak. So having Gliscor was a big help there too. But Toxicroak or Lucario, both good picks, both offensive. Probably physical, could be special for either, but probably physical for most of them. So having a nice physical fighting type gets rid of steals, rocks, and darks mostly. To beat the 4 times glaring weakness that Toxicroak has for Psychic, obviously Lucario has the neutral for Psychic, but beating that, we've actually gone with our second or third? I think it's our third our fire type is going to be Houndoom in this one. We know that Houndoom isn't in the Diamond, Pearl, Platinum Pokédex, but we have been confirmed that he is in the game in the underground tunnels. Obviously, that is a lot of work for a fire type. You could run one prior, could run a Ponyta till you find a Houndoom, until you can get underground. But I'm pretty sure you get your underground kit after your second gym normally. It used to be in Eterna City. So having it there would be really nice, because then you get a Houndoom who is Fire Dark. Getting rid of that Psychic weakness completely, just switch out into Houndoom. He can take a Psychic hit with 0% damage dealt. So it's fantastic. And Houndoom's just a good fire type. He's great. He's got good speed. He's got good special attack. Probably I'll prefer something like Magmortar over Houndoom, but Houndoom probably is quicker and has that dark type, which is really nice against the Psychic types. So I think Houndoom is a great pick. Obviously, if you can't find that, or if you're running Lucario instead, you don't really need the dark type, so you could run something like Rapidash or Flareon instead. I'm going to repeat this again. These ground weaknesses are a killer. So because we've now got the fighting type, fighting steel, fighting poison, which is weak to ground, as well as your starter Pokemon, earthquakes are running through your team. Obviously, you've got 2 flying types, which is fantastic. But if they've got an ice type and they've already dealt with them, you're in a bit of a strife. So we've gone with a Pokemon that is quite offensive. Very offensive typings. It actually has another 4 times weakness, which is a bummer. But the Pokemon instead of this one also had a 4 times weakness. So there's a lot of 4 times weaknesses in this gen, and they come around to be normally the same kind of types. So you've got to be really careful with these ones. So it's actually a Abomasnow. I know it's a bit of a late game mon that you can get, but I really wanted an ice type to just have a bit of coverage to cover the team. Gets rid of grass, gets rid of flying, gets rid of the ground weakness. He's also grass, so he has a resistance to ground and also uses grass moves on them. Gets rid of rock to beat his grass weakness. Gets rid of water. It's just a really good coverage mon that deals with a lot of separate types. Obviously, he's weak to fighting, so if you run Lucario, you're adding another weakness to that. But if you run Toxicroak, you're fine. He's also 4 times weak to fire, which is a pain. And you don't really have any safe switch-ins, because Empoleon is neutral to fire due to his steel type. So it is a bit risky, especially if you got maybe Dry Skin, Toxicroak, and Lucario. They're also weak to fire. So it is quite the risk running Abomasnow. But like I said, there's not many fire types in this generation. So there's nothing really to worry about except maybe an Infernape. But he's fire fighting. So you've got 2 flying types right there ready to go. So I know it is a big risk running these 4 times weak Pokemon. But I think their positives outweigh their negatives by how much coverage they give over certain typings that you don't have in this team, especially because Empoleon's fantastic. He has little to no weaknesses. He has heaps, or almost said hundreds, heaps of resistances, but the ones that he's weak to are fighting in ground, and they're quite common these days, especially with like Drain Punch or Close Combat, Move Tutor moves. Earthquake's very common. Things that a lot of Pokemon have easy access to it, or a lot of Pokemon that have this, or a lot of ground types. Empoleon is the one starter who's weak to both of the other starters, which is a pain, but he's still a great Pokemon, don't get me wrong. I think the resistances far outweigh the negatives, and that's kind of the theme of this team. Like I said, Empoleon's probably the hardest team builder to go around, because you don't want to add more resistances than you have to, but you still want to be able to cover a lot of types that you're weak to without adding too many. So having 4 times weakness, but then having 6 resistances, I think in my books is definitely worth it. So that is my team for Piplup as your starter in BDSP. Probably a very similar-esque team that I will run in the story mode when it comes out. So stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the Let's Play for that. I'm going to have that all on the channel. So if you did enjoy this video, please leave a like and subscribe. Would greatly appreciate it. Make sure you comment down below your starter upcoming in the games. Hopefully who you're going to choose, and let me know what your team thoughts are and what you think of actually my team thoughts and what you would maybe change or whatnot. And remember, as always, take it easy.